As we're getting closer to the DevOps Enterprise Summit, and it's actually, we are 1 week away from it. And if you're listening to this interview, you still have time to register. So the DevOps Enterprise Summit is fully remote this year. And it's gonna be from October 13 to October 15. So make sure you register. And today I have Adam with me, who is a Chief of Platform at Kessel Run. He's actually going to present the work he's been leading in the last few years with Kessel Run, how we revolutionize the DevOps space with the DoD and with the Air Force. It's a very interesting talk. So Adam, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, please. Thanks for having me. My name is Adam Furtado. I'm the Chief of Platform at Kessel Run. And Kessel Run is a U.S. Air Force organization, and we were stood up about 4 years ago to try to prove that you can use modern practices, processes, technologies within the world's largest bureaucracy to try to just more rapidly deliver business outcomes that we were failing to do within the DoD for decades prior.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's a very interesting role and probably very challenging. It was probably challenging, like you mentioned. The DoD is the largest bureaucracy known in the world. So how did you start the DevOps movement at Kessel Run, and also how what was the growing pain points? I'm sure there was a lot of challenges just to get it started, and then to grow your teams, your product teams, and scale to scale your product actually. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. I'll do my best. There's a lot packed in there. Sometimes I think about my life the last 3 or 4 years, and it feels like a movie montage in a lot of ways. But it started in the same way I think a lot of these efforts do within large, kind of slow-moving enterprises. There were a few people who really were kind of tired of the way things that were working or weren't working. And a lot of really smart ideas and serendipity coming together to make Kessel Run a thing. So maybe the TLDR version is there were 3 different efforts that were kind of happening simultaneously within the Air Force as a way to basically take this old model of working. So I mean, we were a case study in poor waterfall development. And a lot of studies showed that it took, across the federal government in the US, 8 to 10 years sometimes to get software out into the field when you take into account requirements processes and testing and all of the things. So I mean, as we're all aware, by the time it gets out into the field, it doesn't matter anymore. We weren't actually solving a problem. So there were a few folks, a guy named Brian Kroger, who's active duty Air Force, who kind of started a small effort in partnership with an organization called the Defense Innovation Unit within the DoD, and their kind of goal was to connect defense needs with commercial industry. And these folks got together and wanted to kind of pilot that you could use DevOps practices within all of the governance and kind of bureaucratic processes and policies that existed. So we started, and this is kind of the story that I told during my presentation, with a small software product to help how we manage and plan in-air refueling. So we did a small kind of software project to take a manual whiteboard process and build software around it that allows people to do their job a little bit easier. And we had really good success really early, which was great. We got lucky that we picked the right problem to solve, which isn't always the case in these kind of efforts. So we got some luck on our side there, but we were able to kind of solve that problem and just kind of show that, look, shipping software quickly does not increase your risk, it decreases it. And that type of conversation was one that we had over and over again with every level of government, to show folks that we're showing you a better way to build software. You're not losing control. We're not increasing risk here. We're actually, decreasing it by shortening our feedback loops. And at the end of the day, delivering actual value and delivering things that users actually need when they need it. And that was something that we weren't used to within the DoD for a long time. There are a couple of great statistics that showed that across federal IT a few years ago, 94% of all IT initiatives were either over schedule or over budget or behind schedule. and 40% of them never delivered a single thing. So not even delivered value or negative value, just didn't deliver at all. So it's just a ton of taxpayer money being utilized on a lot of non-delivery and non-value that we wanted to try to shift that. So Kessel Run kind of, I started some of this movement, but it's really expanded, and there are efforts all across the Air Force and DoD now that are taking lessons learned and growing from them, and trying to solve some really complex, big enterprise challenges that are probably not so dissimilar from a lot of the challenges that a lot of the folks within this conference are feeling day to day, whether that's in fintech or banking or wherever else.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's really interesting. So, you know, how did you grow from? I know you grew from 5 employees at the beginning to, and I think now you have close to probably more than 20 project teams. So, how did you expand the teams, grew the teams, but also how did you introduce the platform culture and all of the infrastructure behind that?
Sure, yeah. So a couple of different approaches there. So at first we grew pretty slowly. We had the initial product team I mentioned earlier. Then we kind of stood up a couple more to solve a couple of different problems. Some of those were pretty successful. Some of them weren't at all. And we learned from that. And I think, but building on the success, all of a sudden, we kind of won over some of our stakeholders and leadership folks who were like a little slow to come around. And now all of a sudden they wanted us to solve every problem. So we were handed a bunch of work and scaled incredibly fast over the next couple of years. From an employee perspective, we started out with the initial 5. We're over 1,300 right now, and that's about 3 years. It was a little tough, to be honest. I mean, all of the things that worked when we were smaller just don't work at that scale. So, and all of the people and those of us who, my background is, I was an active duty Air Force member. So a lot of the tools that we build, I used to use the old versions of them. So I come with a lot of perspective on how software didn't work within the DoD. But from a product leader perspective, I grew with the organization. So all of the things that worked for me and made me good at what I was doing, presumably at 5 teams, doesn't work when you're at 20 teams or 40 teams. You have to learn new ways of working, new systems for communication, and new ways to get alignment across the organization, as an example. So we've learned a ton really fast on what works and what doesn't, and things that we had to adjust kind of over time. On the technology side of the house, we were a very self-aware organization. We all knew what we wanted to kind of grow into from delivering software in a better way. But we also had no experience doing any of it, right? So we needed to get some help, and we were okay admitting that and saying that. So we partnered with Pivotal and Pivotal Labs. They helped us on the product side. And we used Pivotal Cloud Foundry for the first few years. And it was great in that the opinionation and the level of abstraction that a platform like PCF provides, which, a lot of from an engineering perspective, it maybe doesn't sound great, but for us, the abstraction and opinionation was great, right? We wanted help there. We just wanted to figure out how to get value to customers. So we wanted that. And now kind of over time, our platform work has evolved. Now we're kind of moving to a Kubernetes-based container native platform. But I would say that a lot of the things that we've taken now from platform, in the platform organization, we learned on the product side. So again, my background is in product, and I moved over recently to lead our platform organization. And with it, I'm trying to, grow our ability to be more customer centric. And even though we're not, delivering directly to end users necessarily, we do have customers, right? And all the developers that are trying to create value at the end of that value stream. So a lot of the work we're doing right now is kind of building up that product centric kind of culture, even within the services and kind of back end tooling and things that we're building on platform. And that's, it's going pretty well. It's been really fun to kind of use some different muscles and take some lessons learned on the application development side of the house and try to use them within the kind of more services area.
Yeah, so I think that's really interesting that you're coming from a product background, right? Because it does help when you come from product, you understand the value of shifting from, project to project. And so working in software development and helping engineering, it's probably very valuable to bring that background experience in a project and customer centricity experience, right? Yeah, it was probably super valuable. So I'm not super familiar, with the defense Air Force softwares, and I don't know if you can describe some of them to us today, but what are the type of software you're working on, and maybe what is the software or some of the products you are the most proud of?
Sure, yeah. So we have basically two core mission areas, we call them internally. One of those product lines is focused on modernizing the air operations centers. So around the world today, the air part of an air camp of a campaign, of a war, if you will, are planned in these things called air operations centers. There are 22 physical locations around the world with people inside of them that do everything from strategizing and planning and executing a war from a day-to-day basis. So and that is a bunch of different kind of tasks and takes a bunch of different software and hardware to complete. So we're providing basically software as a service for these unique user bases to be able to do that most efficiently. And in a lot of cases, we are replacing 30-year-old legacy systems that have been in the field forever, that are really hard to kind of decouple and chip away at and strangle away. In some cases, we're replacing things like Microsoft Excel and PowerPoint. And you'll see, if you go to our user base, they've found ways to solve problems. Usually it's workarounds to work around the bad software we've provided for 30 years. And those workarounds start to calcify, and it makes the user and product challenges really difficult. But most of the software we build are kind of web-based software that allows people to take the processes that they've been doing manually and automate them and digitize them. And then over time start kind of automating, doing some feature automation and introducing AI, ML over time to kind of help some of that work out. But the majority, it's a lot of like kind of workflow management and making data available. So today, those buildings exist around the world, and the problem is, like, because of the old IT infrastructure, people have to be in a particular building using particular hardware to utilize particular data, and you can't share it around the world, which becomes a real problem in our context, in that, like, as an example, the Air Operations Center for the Middle East is located in Qatar, right across the Arabian Gulf from Iran, right? So that is not the place that we want to have our personnel if something were to happen. So we want to build an IT infrastructure that allows us to be more flexible, allows us to be more modular, and allows for data to be available whenever you need it, wherever you need it. And that comes with a lot of risk. So we talk about DevOps and software in the same way that everybody else here does. The risk associated with that is just a little bit different for us, and we really do take that into account. Obviously, in the talk, I talk about how failure to us is not a loss of subscribers or revenue, but it's a loss of lives. And it makes the kind of work we do very serious, but it's really important too. So yeah, I would say that we are kind of building most of our software to do that. Our second product line is on aircraft maintenance. So it's all the folks whose job it is to maintain the various aircraft of the Air Force. How do you make sure that they're ready to fly? We're building software to help with that. So if you imagine an engineer on a flight line, turning a wrench on an aircraft, having an iPad available to keep up with the data in real time, which then would, make that data available on the planning side, so you know how many aircraft are available to you to plan whatever missions you have that day. So it's a lot of tying data together and making sure that decision quality information can get to the people who need to make the decisions.
Thank you. Thank you. Those are really impressive projects and software. So a question on, you talked about locality and the ability to collaborate. So do you feel that with the pandemic, you had to speed up how you work, how you collaborate, and on critical software like that? And what did you do differently?
Yeah, for sure. It was a tough one for us. So we, I would say that for the first few years of Kessel Run, we optimized for being in the same room. All of our kind of product and engineering practices, we had our, work visualization on stickies and whiteboards and all of the things. So we quickly had to adapt to that. We also have the unique problem of our production environments being on classified networks, which you do have to access from particular locations. So it isn't really as easy as us being able to go fully remote and having our engineers have access to the production environment and that kind of thing to see what's going on. So we had to move everybody remote almost overnight. So we did it in 2 days in that second week of March, I think. It was March 14th. And we did pretty well for the most part. We were pretty set up for it. Our productivity increased the first 3 weeks. We actually doubled our deployment frequency the first 3 weeks coming out of the going remote, which was great. And I think a lot of companies and organizations saw that initially. And then it dropped a bit. And I think we started to, people started to feel like, okay, this isn't just kind of new and, exciting in some way anymore. It's now like becoming a bit of a burden. We have to deal with, childcare and all the things everybody's been dealing with. So we saw a bit of a dip in morale and that kind of thing. So we really had to have like a really serious conversation that was like, look, this is not really temporary anymore. Let's assume this is long-term. Get yourself as comfortable as you can. We tried to provide the equipment and collaboration tools that we could to make things a little bit easier. But I think we've done I think we've done a fairly good job of maintaining productivity and maneuvering around some of the complexities. But it's certainly been a challenge for folks.
Yeah, and I think every organizations are still in the process of learning, right? It's just been 6 to 9 months. I think we're still learning about how we can better collaborate, how we can better deal with the pandemic, and we still don't have a lot of visibility on when it's going to be over. So I know that for a lot of organizations, we had to adapt, and we're still learning from that. Yeah.
One of the things that came out of that is we went into a bit of a hiring stretch over the summer. And then all of a sudden we realized, like, we always knew we had to open up to remote candidates within the organization. I don't know that we felt we were prepared for it yet. And then we got prepared for it really quickly out of necessity, right? So in our recent hiring kind of push over the summer, we had over 1,400 candidates apply for Kessel Run, and it was something in the 400 range the previous kind of stretch we were doing, because we opened up to remote candidates. So we're bringing a lot of full-time remote candidates from all over the country to be Kessel Run employees in various roles. So that's going to make us kind of figure out how to be a remote first organization out of necessity. So we're kind of working through what that's going to look like, and it'll be a learning kind of experience for us. We're pretty excited for it.
Right, yeah. And there are some companies we can learn from, right? Like GitLab, they are fully remote and they publish all of their best practices. Mm-hmm. So I think we can learn from some companies. They're not many, but some companies are fully remote. I've always been fully remote, and they do it really well, actually. So talking about hiring and culture, I saw that you are pretty active and you're leading some really cool initiative in the D&I space. So what are some of the initiatives that you are the most, excited about? And I think that's driving change, in terms of inclusion and diversity within the DoD.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think at maybe like a more higher level, it's a really interesting discussion to have about D&I in the military space, particularly regardless of your opinions on the government and politics and all of that, there is like a strategic imperative to increase diversity in all workforces, including ours, and we certainly take that to heart. I think that our D&I strategy, if you will, is rooted in like a core tenet of Kessel Run of trying to increase psychological safety, and I think that the idea of inclusion is born out of that in a lot of ways. So we do some things differently within Kessel Run than you would see in the rest of the defense industry, I think. As an example, we have a lot of active duty military folks on our team, product folks and engineers. And in our lab, like they won't be in uniforms all day long. And we do that so that we can make sure that somebody of a lower rank may be on a balanced product team with somebody of a higher rank. And I want that person to be able to share their ideas and feel comfortable. So we've been able to kind of build that culture. It's actually been really interesting. One of the things that, people were concerned about were like, oh, we're going to lose the military kind of discipline, the esprit de corps, and the things that make the military unique. And we've actually found that the folks who have come through Kessel Run working in this different way have like competed very well in the rest of their time and elsewhere when they go and try to like compete for whether that's awards or promotions and things like that. And I really think it's like if you take somebody of a lower rank or more junior in their career, and you give them the opportunity to feel like an equal to people with more experience and more background and more kind of diverse upbringings and all that, they're going to be more prepared going forward. So I think we've seen the fruits of some of that. So we're working on the inclusion front. Talking about diversity specifically, we are at the Venn diagram of tech and defense, which is very white and very male. So we have a lot of work to do in getting to the place that we want to get, which is a diverse workforce, not just in thought, but in actual demographic diversity. And some of the ways that we're doing that are trying to connect with communities of women and people of color. And we've actually seen we saw a big difference in this recent hiring event I mentioned earlier, that the amount of women and people of color we're bringing in now it's far increased from where we were at previously. We've also done a couple of things around having like women targeted recruiting events where you can talk to people who are current employees who are women in the organization to, like, if you're feeling a little bit of trepidation around, like, I don't know, the defense feels a little bit like, I don't know, that's where my path is, or like strange to work for the government. I don't really know what that means. I'm a creative. You can actually talk to a designer who works at Kessel Run and maybe had the same kind of trepidation you did, but you can hear like how things have been going and how women are treated and all of those things. So we've tried to do our best to just open up the transparency and honesty around the conversation as best we can. And we think it's going in the right direction, but we have a long way to go to get to where we want to go.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I'm so glad you're talking at the DevOps Enterprise Summit. I think we don't have enough talks about how we transform, how we become agile, and how we adopt DevOps within the DoD. And so I think you're doing great work at Kessel Run, and I'm sure everybody's going to be super excited about listening to your talk. So I highly recommend you to register to the DevOps Enterprise Summit and listen to Adam Furtado's talk. So thank you so much, Adam. Before we leave, any word of wisdom about, how do you work in such a bureaucratic culture? How do you make it happen? What are the key lessons learned from your perspective?
Sure. Yeah, I think the major lesson is you have to kind of keep at the conversation around outcomes. I think it's really easy for bureaucratic leadership to become enamored with technology and the idea of DevOps and moving, but like the hard work behind it is not as easy, and you need to just keep combating that by making sure we're tying back. The reason that we're doing DevOps is to solve business outcomes. It's not just to do DevOps and to be a more modern organization. We think it's the best way to solve the problems that we have. I think keeping and hitting that talking point, and it's going to take a long time for everybody to come around, but that's the kind of where my headspace is in some of these conversations for sure.
Thank you very much. Yeah, and thank you all for listening to this interview. And I hope to see you at the DevOps Enterprise Summit. Thank you. Bye.